the embrace of God's presence can help us transcend brokenheartedness?
Perhaps the solution to our problem of brokenheartedness is simply to remember that we're all hurting together.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
James Weingardner sitting in for Pastor Lutz, and it's good to have you with us. It's also great to have a good topic to discuss and a great panel. Let's have our panel introduce themselves to you just now.
I'm Tom Plumbley. I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church in Fort Worth, Texas. We're a part of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ.
I'm ANDREA LUXTON. I'm president of Andrews University in Berrien Springs, Michigan, which is affiliated with the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Hi, I'm Carl TROVALL. I'm professor of ethics and history at Concordia University in Austin, Texas. It is affiliated with the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as senior rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
We have a really great subject to discuss today, and let's get right to it. Countless people experience the loss of a loved one. Isaiah 61 says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me to heal the brokenhearted." If the Holy Spirit, or Ruach, is all about healing the brokenhearted, then why aren't we doing more of it? COVID has taken the lives of 4.2 million of our brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers worldwide. The United States leads the world in COVID deaths now, surpassing 600,000. It's estimated that broken-hearted people are the great unseen casualty of all this death and loss. What on earth are we missing? How can we help one another heal from the tragic losses that we all experience? We talk so much about immunity, but when it comes to being brokenhearted, none of us is immune. How do we respond? Or is there a better way? How do we move away from guilt and shame and finger-pointing and blame? We ask our panelists to consider the following questions. One, many people think that we're simply fulfilling Bible prophecy and reaping what we sow. What can we do to move away from a culture of blame and help others get back in the game? Two, what more can our churches, synagogues, and mosques do to actually vaccinate us from the pandemic of brokenheartedness? And three, how do we increase the role of the Holy Spirit, or Ruach, in our lives? How do we stop playing the role of the comforter, but become so synced with the will of God that we become a catalyst for the coming of the Comforter? We'll start today with Dan.
Well, I think this question of how do we help people heal from brokenheartedness is essential given all of the turmoil that you mentioned in your opening statement. In the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible, we're taught that we are obligated to love. And we're obligated to love in 4 ways. One is love our neighbor and love ourself, love the stranger, and love of the Holy One. And I think that all of those commandments to love are interwoven and intersecting. So how is it that I'm able to love? What is it that love does? And love is when you care so much about someone else that you literally feel what that other person feels. That you are so sensitized, so connected to that other, that their experience is your experience. So how is it that I can feel love or experience love for someone else if I'm unwilling to feel love for myself? Which means a willingness and an openness to feel the brokenness, Tom, that you identified in your statement. And I think there's so much in American tradition that keeps us from doing that. There is this idea in America of valuing stoicism and of championing unfeeling. Think about it. Whenever you go up to somebody in America and you say, "How are you?" What do they say? "Fine." Good. What if they're not fine? What do they say? "Okay." I mean, how ironic is it in our culture that when you're not okay, you say, "I'm okay." It's almost like we have no permission in our society to admit or acknowledge that we're not okay, or that we're broken, or that we need that sense of care. And so I think there's so much in our tradition that reminds us that we have to reach out with love and care and be that agent of spirit to those with whom we share our lives, to help to comfort them in their brokenheartedness, to help them to transcend that sense of loneliness, of brokenness that we feel. There's more that I'll share a little bit later, but one of the traditions that I love in Jewish tradition teaches that when the Israelites were traveling in the wilderness and they built what's called the Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark, the vessel for the Ten Commandments, that in addition to the second set of tablets that God had Moses fashion, God also told Moses to put the broken set in there right next to them, as a reminder that there is a brokenness to us in addition to a wholeness and holiness to us, and we have to remember to nurture both aspects of our spirit.
Tom?
Thank you. I think this is a critical conversation for us in this time, in this year, in this era of our nation's history, of our world's history, because of all the isolation and the stunted grief, the blunted grieving, the hurt, the shutdown, the economic difficulties that have been a part of all of this. The danger, you see, is that the wounds of the pandemic carry far, far beyond what the actual disease does. And I think until we stand up and say we're all hurting, we've got a ways to go. I wrote a blog article for my own congregation about this not too long ago, and one of my members got back to me and she said, she spoke affirmatively of what I had to say, and she just said, I agree, we're just all done. Those were her words. We're just all done. We're just fed up. We don't know, for instance, what sort of changes in ethics are going to be required for us coming out of this. I think throughout this pandemic time, we've seen this clash of the requirement of social responsibility and also the call for personal liberties, and all of that being in conflict. We don't know what kind of ethical standards are going to emerge after we work ourselves through that. But what we do know is that we hurt. Every one of us has been saddened. Every one of us has grieved. Every one of us has been in this prolonged period, which for many, many, many people has included depression, demoralization, conferences in schools about whether our students will ever catch up, and so forth. I think we have to begin by giving each other a little wider berth. Give each other more room. Be willing to forgive even the people that we disagree with radically. even the people that we think are most difficult. I'll have some more things to say later, some biblical stuff, but at least that might help us get the conversation started.
Thanks. Andrea?
Yeah, if I look back over my career, there have been 2 or 3 times where, in administration, something happens and everything kind of goes poof all of a sudden. And one thing that has become evident to me in each of those cases is that it has resulted in a torrent of communication. But the heart of that communication, the ones that stay with me, goes something like this. Can I tell you a story? And now comes this story of pain, heartbreak. And then very often at the end there's a line, I haven't told anyone else this before. Sometimes this gift that I am holding in my hand is something that happened 30 years ago, 40 years ago. But the heartbreak and the pain has still remained. And when this kind of thing has happened, I have often sat there and thought, okay, how do we on a more regular basis give people that permission? The permission to be able to be vulnerable and be able to say, I'm brokenhearted. And trust us enough to be able to take that gift they're giving us and not trample on it. That's just one thought. I just want to go to the Bible for a moment. I've just recently gone through a graduation service, so I had a great speaker. And he looked at a passage of Scripture in a way that made me think about that a little bit different. It's New Testament, and it's when Christ is going up to heaven, and what happens right at that point, beginning of Acts. And you have that image of Jesus going up to heaven, having talks to the disciples and promising them that a comforter will come. And it says they stand there gazing up to heaven after he's gone. And the speaker talked about how to him that gazing was this moment of being frozen, being fearful. They've actually lost something. They're actually quite broken. Broken because their dreams of how things were didn't come out. Broken because they had lost somebody. Yes, he'd come back to life, but now he's gone again. Or just broken, now what? And that after that, what happened, 2 things happened. They go away, but these disciples who had been beating each other up on who would be the greatest in the kingdom and competing with each other, all of a sudden there's this coming together, this sharing, this being together. And when they come together and they look at their priorities going forward, that is when the Spirit comes to them. So take it away from that example, I think there were 2 things here. One is this coming together, this human support, this sense of community, importance of what we do to each other, that then gives the space of God also to be very present and for the Spirit to be part of that.
Thank you. Carl?
Well, I'm thinking to jump on the theological point. I mean, the peace of Christ's ascension, of course, is also so that he can send the Spirit, which now filling us as the people of God, now we're the Christ presence in the world. And so our presence, and this is where I was going to go, is just the importance of presence and being connected with people. We're separated often physically in the pandemic. We've come together, many of us, for a little bit, and now we're pulling back again in the Delta variant. But I think even the presence, and by I mean presence, I mean sitting and listening and just being there, not having to say anything, to even solve anything, but to hear and ask. I love your also your idea of sharing story. I mean, what's the story? And just asking people and listening. The power of healing and just being present in that non-reactive, vulnerable way is powerful. And I mean, to me, that's what connects up with trying to be the presence of Christ. Where is God? Well, God is with us and with you in our listening.
Dan?
So what you said, Carl, reminds me of a famous Hasidic story. So the founder of Hasidic Judaism, the Baal Shem Tov, was creating a process for the celebration of the New Year. And in the New Year, Jews sound the ram's horn, the shofar, and there are supposedly 100 different sounds that are made. And so Hasidic tradition teaches that there are 100 different, what are called kavanot, or prayers of intention. So there was a man who wished to be the Baal Tekiah, the shofar sounder for the Baal Shem Tov. And for 2 years, he studied how to sound the horn and all of these intentions and all of these individual prayers he was supposed to say. And he came to the day for the audition, and he couldn't even make a sound on the horn. He was just totally overwhelmed, and he was crestfallen. And he sat down in a corner and began to weep. And the Baal Shem Tov thought about it and says, I choose you. And he says, how come you choose me? I couldn't even make a sound. And the Baal Shem Tov says that in God's realm, there's a palace. And the palace has 100 rooms. And each of those rooms has a key that opens the lock to those rooms. And then the Baal Shem Tov said each of those kavanot, for each of those sounds of the shofar, is the key that would open those individual rooms. He says, but there's one key that opens all those rooms, and the room to the presence of the Holy One, and that is the key of the broken heart. And it is because of your brokenheartedness that you will be the proper vessel that will allow all our prayers to ascend. And I think that what I love about that story is not just the message that it is the brokenhearted that is the proper vessel, but that the Baal Shem Tov sat in his sorrow, in his brokenness, and said, my love is with you, and I validate you not as a broken vessel, but as the proper vessel.
Tom?
Well, I appreciate that. I want to think about Job because I remember that when Job suffered through all that he had suffered, he found holiness. He found God not in the pious efforts or the chastening efforts or the reasoning efforts of his friends, or even in the friends themselves, but in the whirlwind itself, in the storm that he was in. God is making something new today, even despite all of our mess. And perhaps we can mend our hearts by understanding that God is still at work. The Holy still moves despite all of this other mess.
Andrea?
Job. Job has got to be one of my favorite books for exactly that same reason. I think it is that is the book that I have gone to in the most difficult moments, because Job to me is there's no argument, there's no reason, there's no real answer to this. But let me show you myself. Let me show you who I am. And in showing you who I am, maybe that can bring you the peace. Because that who I am shows you that I am so much bigger, and you do not have to fear or doubt in that sense. So thank you for raising Job, because I think that is it's a really, those last few chapters of Job are just amazing in their beauty.
We have had a beautiful discussion. Thank you all. We're all broken in many ways, but we're all called to minister to the brokenness. Let's go to a break and we'll come right back.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at AmericanReligious.org. That's AmericanReligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall Estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back. We do appreciate your viewership. We also appreciate your comments. Just as was said during the break, please send us your comments by mail or through our website. And we'd also love to thank our sponsor. This program's been going for so many years, and it's always been a blessing to many of us, and I hope to you as well. Now we'll have our panelists sum up their thoughts on today's important topic.
Thank you. Friends, we are in uncharted territory. There have been awful times in human history. There have been times more awful than the one that we're in. But never have there been so many of us. And never have we known of each other's pain as instantaneously as we do now because of our modern communication systems. Therefore, the emotional dynamics of our interrelatedness and of our internal sense of well-being or not well-being, all of that has been tested by pandemic and politics in spades. People of faith, however, need to lead in response.
I was deeply influenced by a book by Henry Nouwen called The Wounded Healer back when I was just beginning ministry. And the basic premise is that essentially, we often think that because we're broken and wounded, we therefore are somehow incapable of helping other people. And yet that brokenness and woundedness actually can be the very source of strength, because it gives us solidarity with others who are brokenhearted. It humbles, it's humbling for us too, that we can be in present, but that it brings us into community and solidarity with all who are broken because we've been broken ourselves. And it was very liberating for me, and I hope that those who might be suffering through whatever brokenness you're experiencing, not only that you might reach out and get help, but also that realize that God is going to use you in some way through that brokenness to bring us all together. And our theme at our school this year is to redeem the space between us, and I hope that we can continue to redeem the spaces between all of us.
Thank you.
So I think that part of what our tradition teaches is how important community is in helping people to heal. I'm thinking, Carl, as you're speaking, of how important community is and fellowship is for people who are in recovery from addiction, and how walking that path, admitting that I am powerless and that I need the energy of other people walking that path to wholeness will help me to get there, is so vital to that kind of healing. I'm also thinking about what Jewish tradition teaches about mourning rituals. So when you observe a loss in Jewish tradition, the immediate mourners rend a garment. They literally express that tearing on their outer garment so that people see that's someone who's broken. But then after that first week of what we call Shiva, when the whole community has been there to help us to mourn, and we have felt the embrace of community, we don't wear that garment forever. We are allowed to baste it. We can't fix it permanently. You always have to show that scar. but we don't wear it forever because the healing must come. Jewish tradition teaches you're not allowed to wallow in self-pity. You're not allowed to just lose yourself in your brokenness. You have to try to move towards healing. The first thing you're supposed to do when you come home from a funeral service in Jewish tradition is to eat. That just like after every life cycle event, whether it's a celebration of a birth or coming of age or a wedding, it's customary to have a meal. And one of the foods that's customary to have is a hard-boiled egg, because the egg symbolizes the cycle of life and rebirth. And so the first thing you're supposed to do, even in the midst of the worst day of your life, is to say, this isn't where I will always be. And I will avail myself of God's love and the love of community to get myself to a place of wholeness and healing.
You know, when you look at the whole concept of grief, we're used to saying there's all these different stages of grief. But basically, there's no right or wrong way of grieving. We don't choose how we're going to grieve. We're to one person may be angry. One person is going to be immobile. One person is going to react a different way. I love the concept of having built into the system that you kind of say, hey, but I'm going to move past this. But I think that going back to something Tom said earlier, we really have to give each other space. One of the most disappointing things to me in society right now, and what I hear is the criticisms we throw at each other all the time. You know, it's so much easier to criticize the way someone else is doing something, the way someone else is acting, the way this is going on, the way that is going on, than to actually stop and say, you know, they're suffering. Let's give them a break. Let's give them a break and let's actually listen to them and be there for them. And yeah, maybe they'll be there for me too when I need someone to give me a break and be there for me. And I think it's in that kind of space that we can bring together the kind of community. And I think that's where God is present too.
Wow. Some really beautiful comments and appreciate this. The Charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. Now, friends, until next week at the same time and on the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.